Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Eric Bassett. Eric is the host of the BugBux Podcast, also has a learning platform, BugBux Plus. Eric is also the vice president and co-owner of Natura Pest Control in Vancouver, Washington. If there's anybody that you want to learn from when it comes to pest control, this is the guy right here. Eric, I want to thank you for coming on today and taking the time to speak with me. For the few people who are listening who don't know you already, take a moment, introduce yourself, give us kind of your origin story, how you got into the pest control world, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much, first of all, for having me on your show. You run an awesome program, and I really appreciate the shout out for the BugBux podcast. We work really hard to put out quality content for pest control owners, so we appreciate the love. Yeah, my background in the pest control industry, I think it's similar to most people. The pest control industry kind of sneaks up on you. You don't really go looking for it, and then it ropes you in and you get your feet wet. And at first, it's just a job. And then you realize, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here. And so it's like this diamond in the rough kind of scenario. When I graduated high school, my brother-in-law, who's now my business partner, said, dude, you should go knock doors in California, sell pest control, make good money. And I did that, made great money, hated every minute of it. Knocking doors is tough. You guys listening. And the next year, I swore I wouldn't do it again. And my brother-in-law convinced me to start knocking for a local company in Boise, Idaho.
Mhm.
And I did that for a few years, had good success, made good money. Eventually, that is when they wanted to transition to inside sales. It was a time when marketing was making a transition from your traditional forms to digital forms. And they said, hey, Eric, we want to do this inside sales thing. Can you manage this department for us? And I agreed, came in, and took off from there. That's where I started my inside sales and marketing background with pest control companies. And I was with that company as their director of sales for a few years before they got purchased and acquired by Rentokil, which at the time, I don't think anyone else knew who Rentokil was, but now everybody does.
Yeah.
So with the Terminix acquisition and all that fun stuff. So I joined, worked for the Rentokil team for a couple of years. And then my brother-in-law, who I had been following around with different opportunities since the beginning, contacted me and said, hey, dude, we've got this Natura branch in Vancouver, Washington. They'd been building it and growing it since 2013. And it was about 5 years in. And they said, dude, we should partner. If you're traveling all over the place for Rentokil anyway, we should join forces and see what we can do to build and scale this company. So joined in as their director of sales and marketing. Within about a year, had an opportunity to buy out one of their partners.
Mhm.
So I sold some real estate, made my big first investment into pest control, and became an owner. And since then, it's been crazy. We've been building and scaling that company together. Obviously, we started the BugBux Facebook group as an educational networking platform for PCOs. We created the educational platform for further education for PCOs. And then we have since partnered with vendors to create a vendor network to give them resources. And then I also have a little pest control consulting on the side that I do when I magically have time, which I don't have a lot of.
Sure.
So that's my background. And I just enjoy learning about PCOs, their journey, helping them build and scale, and giving access to resources that I didn't have when I was first starting out. So that's my calling.
Sure. That is an awesome calling and an awesome story, too. Like you said, a lot of people stumble into pest control. It
Mhm.
finds you for sure. One of the things that is a little bit different on your end than I see some other pest control operators, and it's something to take note of because there's a real opportunity here that I think people overlook is that you bought your way into the
Mhm.
ownership. You invested into an existing company, which is amazing. Now,
Yeah.
you had the framework already from the history, but just being able to buy your way into that leverage and take ownership of something is huge. When you first bought into Natura, what were
Mhm.
some of the challenges that you faced from a marketing and sales standpoint when you first got in?
What was interesting is that I joined in 2018, and at the time we were still utilizing door to door.
Mhm.
And that's what our bread and butter was, is what we had used to grow by thousands of accounts every single year. And we had a marketing partner at the time. And so I came in and immediately started having meetings with that marketing partner. I
Mhm.
wanted to fight for clarity. I want to know what kind of exposure we're getting, how we're getting leads, what those leads are doing, how they're affecting our growth. And that was my contribution in the very beginning. And then we made some changes, moved to a different marketing partner. I implemented some programs and some systems in our inside sales team to better track performance.
Mhm.
And we started noticing, okay, like maybe we can really grow with digital marketing and inside sales more than we can grow, or at least the climb with door to door. The higher you go, the less space there is, and the more difficult it seems to be to sustain that type of growth model. Hats off to some of the big players in the industry, buddies of mine who have just soared with it. They've kept that going because it's not an easy model to scale. And so as we maybe phased out of the door-to-door model, we continued to invest and put a lot of time and effort into the systems and processes for inside sales. And we trained up our inside sales team and we coached up kind of our marketing partner. And I continued to build resources that helped us evaluate our marketing performance
Mhm.
so that we could actually know, okay, what's working, what's not working. And doing that, when you create a system of accountability, it isn't the funnest thing to do, right? Nobody likes to have accountability meetings where you talk about performance and their role in the performance and whether or not they're meeting goals, right? Meeting standards. It's not the most fun conversation to have, but it's so critical to growth. If you're not evaluating, then how do you know where you are? How do you know what's working? You know what I mean?
So you have an interesting perspective that a lot of people don't, which is starting and going so heavy on the door-to-door side. And a lot of our listeners are on the wildlife side. So door-to-door isn't nearly as prominent in that world simply because it's more of it's an emergent service, right? And it's not
100%.
something that you're not sitting around hoping that somebody has a wildlife problem. They're getting in touch with you when they have one and when they have one
Mhm.
only. And sometimes even 6 months after they've got a wildlife problem. But was there, for those who don't have that door-to-door experience and only have, whether it's traditional or digital, or maybe they're just starting out, was there anything, obviously you mentioned accountability, but was there anything that really fueled your digital strategy or your marketing strategy overall that you learned and took from the door-to-door side of things?
Yeah, I think with door to door, you learn that you have to trust in the process. There's a lot of forethought and training that goes into your pitch and how you're approaching customers and what you're saying and how you're saying it. And there's just, you realize that it's a numbers game.
Mhm.
And if you take that perspective over to a digital marketing side of things, you realize it's really similar. You have to lock in the type of exposure that you want, which platforms are going to get you the best exposure, what's going to get you the best brand awareness. And then you also have to realize what combines, what you're going to put in your ecosystem, we call it that, so that everything is contributing to the success of the other, right? For if you have a website, right? And then you have a Google My Business profile and you got a Facebook page and an Instagram, and maybe you have some of these other methods. Maybe you use a paid search like Angie or Thumbtack. You want to make sure that all of those different platforms are communicating with one another and they're exposing your brand to customers in the way that you want it to be. That way it drives performance, it drives leads, it drives conversions. And I feel like it's easier said than done, right? You need to have somebody that's got that mindset where they realize, hey, it's not just about going out and dumping money into campaigns. You know what I mean? I think people imagine that digital marketing is one of the, oh, I just sign up for a platform and then I tell Google how much money I want to spend, which you can do that technically, but how effective it is might not be what you expect. So when you get marketing partners like yourself, when you have agencies and partners that realize that there's a process to it, that there's a flow, there's a customer journey that comes from the initial exposure to maybe a landing page, to a customer intention, to being a conversion, to being a lead, to closing the deal, to executing on what you've sold them, right? And then maintaining that customer relationship throughout the whole chain. The process of it all is something that you have to really engage with and dedicate yourself to understanding. Otherwise, I feel like a lot of PCOs and just business owners in general get lost in it. They just don't realize, okay, I'm not sure if the campaign's working or not. If it's not working, I don't know why it's not working. If I'm getting conversions, but I'm not getting leads, I don't understand why that's a problem. Is my inside sales team, what's their closing rate? Are we converting to new business? If we're not closing on the first phone call, what's our follow-up procedure, right? And so there's this evaluation system that you need to have built in so that you can make sure that your marketing is successful. And on the wildlife side of things, what's beautiful about it is that typically when people call, like you said, they've got a situation. They need something right away. And so the demand that you have from those customers is high,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And most of these people, it's okay, dude, who can I call that can solve this problem? And I want you guys out here right now.
Mhm.
Like I heard a raccoon in my crawl space. I've got a rat. I've got whatever's going on. You can really take your company to the next level if you marry the demand that you have from your market to
Mhm.
having a system and a process in place to evaluate performance.
Yeah. Now, as far as evaluating that performance goes, and really, and I love the phrase you used, marrying the demand, because
Mhm.
that is something that not enough people think about. And to give you an example that I always throw to the wildlife side, because there's a good handful of guys that start wildlife and then want to transition to pest, and they
Mhm.
start running ads for pest control, and they get 10 leads, and they're like, oh my gosh, these 10 leads came out of nowhere, and then only one of them closes. And they're
Yeah.
like, what happened? Why are these junk leads coming? What are these
Mhm.
junk leads? How does this happen? And I always ask them, I say, have you seen a spider in your house in the last year? Almost always the answer is yes. Have you seen a
Yep.
raccoon in your house in the last year? The answer is no. If you saw a spider in your house the same day you saw a raccoon in your house, which one are you calling about?
Yeah,
You
you
got
call.
to analyze the demand and how it relates to the marketing that you're doing, because that's going to be a huge driver in how and where you spend your money.
Yep.
So, circling back to the question that I had, when it comes to analyzing that success from the different marketing platforms, is there any particular tool or methodology or something that maybe people miss when it comes to doing that stands out to you?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's important is understanding, and with pest control, it's a little bit different than wildlife, but both of them still have seasons that you're going to have higher demand than others. For pest control, you have this kind of bell curve where you get into the hot summer months when hatching cycles for insects are really prolific and you get a lot of demand. And your marketing kind of phases up to that, it phases up to meet the demand. For wildlife, your phasing could look different, and it depends on the market too.
Yeah.
One thing that I always tell people, and I ask when I do my consulting calls, is we'll talk about marketing, and I'll say, are you tracking your lead volume?
Mm-hmm.
Are you tracking when those leads are coming in and what your demand looks like over the course of a year so you can understand your phasing? Because once you understand what percentage of your lead volume is coming in, you can start to build a marketing method or a marketing campaign where the spend follows suit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the last thing you want to do is have high spend in a low demand time of year
Yeah.
and then low spend in a high demand time of year. And again, having a smart marketing partner, Tate here, makes that a lot easier because typically pest control owners and wildlife owners really aren't thinking about the phasing model of the demand in their market.
Sure.
So first is looking at that. And then the next thing I usually will tell people is let's look at your spend and then let's take a peek at the number of leads that are coming in the door that are
Mm-hmm.
qualified, that are actual opportunities for you to sell. And let's do some quick math here and just see what your cost per qualified lead per campaign is,
Sure.
right? Because everybody pays to play,
Mm-hmm.
and how much you're willing to pay to play makes a difference. And the bigger your appetite is for the game you're trying to play, the more that makes a difference. You might be in a position in your company where you say, okay, here's my budget for marketing. And maybe that budget, that kind of demand, that appetite for leads is probably going to net me this many. And I really want to focus on only spending X amount of dollars per lead.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, right? If you have that information and you track that over the course of a year, now you have really actionable data. You can look over the year, you can see what month gives you the most leads, how much you're spending per month, what your cost per lead is. And then when the next year rolls around, you can start phasing and planning and projecting out your marketing spend and your growth.
Yeah.
So then you take that budget, you give it to somebody who's going to manage it like Tate, and you say, hey, I've got whatever it is, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 or more that I want to put into marketing. And it's not just a guess. It's not just, hey, let's see where things spend, but it's an educated decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know where the performance is going to come from. And the longer that you do that, the closer that it gets, right?
Sure.
And the better that you become at doing it. And then you can start really fine tuning things like, okay, if I break this down by campaign, which one of these campaigns gets me the best volume?
Sure.
Which one of the campaigns gets me the best cost per lead? Which one of these campaigns gets me the best quality of lead? I think that cost and quality and volume are these three levers that you're usually struggling with to manipulate, right? And you only get two usually.
Yeah.
You might get a high volume of quality leads, but you're not going to get them very cheap.
Right.
You might get a high volume of leads that are cheap, but the quality is not really going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
So you're moving these three levers to figure out what combination is going to give you the best growth, the best cost per lead, right? And overall the best quality, because you don't want your team dealing with crap leads. And I'm sure you probably get that complaint from a lot of wildlife and pest control owners. Like you said before, these guys are like, dude, I got 10 leads and I only sold one of them. Is this what pest control is really? And so part of that is identifying maybe areas of opportunity on the sales side,
Mm-hmm.
but the other part is identifying quality on the lead side.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And that leads me into a question that I've been dying to ask you, which is, once the leads are in, obviously getting leads is as funny as it is to say, because it's the big question that everybody has, is how do we get leads? Getting the leads is actually the easy part once the system's in place. What on the sales side of things is the biggest driver, would you say? Is it an excellent inbound salesperson? Is it a specific sales process or script or inspection process? What stands out to you as really moving the needle for people on inbound sales?
Man, this is such a good question. And I love that we're diving into this. It's a little bit of everything that you mentioned. So I look at it from a chronological process. When a lead finally gets to your phone, I always tell people that the best ability for your team to have is availability. So that phone starts to ring once, twice, got to get that answered and got to get going on it. The faster that you can get that lead to a qualified person to handle that customer, the better. And especially in wildlife. In pest control, you want to do that quickly, and the quicker the better. But sometimes people can wait on stuff. You get a situation where it's like, hey, we saw a spider in the house. I'd love a quote. Call me back when you can. Maybe. I've got a raccoon in my attic. Nobody's waiting for you on that one. So it's even more crucial in the wildlife game that when that call comes in, somebody answers quickly, right? They're positive, they're pleasant, they're easy to work with. When somebody has a problem that they're trying to solve, the last thing they want to deal with is having to navigate a complicated conversation or a problem with who they're trying to solve it with. People like to buy from people that is easy to do business. That kind of leads me into the process side of things. I teach a sales call flow to all my inbound salesmen, or salespeople, I should say. And that call flow is actually for both customer service and sales. It has a very similar layout. And a lot of it's pretty simple. The first thing that you do is you acknowledge the problem. You build trust with that person. You confidently let them know that you're there to help. You're there to take care of what their issue is. And then you prepare them. Hey, I'm just going to ask you some questions, make sure I fully understand what's going on. That way we can take care of this for you. And then you're in the discovery phase, right? You get to ask all these questions and they're prepared for you to ask them. They're happy to answer the questions because you've primed them for it. And then once you have all the information, you give them a little summary statement. Hey, I'm just going to explain what the next steps are. That way we can hit on all these things that you're looking to do, right? You give them an explanation of their services, and then we move to the next step, which is called closing and consensus, right? After I've explained how the process works, I ask them, hey, I know we've went through a lot. Does everything that I said make sense? Do you have any questions about that before we talk about the price? See if there's any issues there, because I like to divide concerns about the service and concerns about the price. I want to know which thing I'm trying to battle, right? And so we answer those questions. We talk about the price tag, see if there are any additional concerns. And then we do what's called conclusion, right? Where we go over all the details, cross the T's, dot the I's, make sure we're good to go. In the format where you have an inspection that you're trying to close on, it's probably very similar, right? Instead of talking about the service you provide, it's, hey, here's what our inspection is going to look like, and here's why it's important, right? We're going to hit on these key things. That way we can make sure that we solve this problem the way that you want it solved. Hey, do you have any questions about how we're going to do that before we talk about the price? And maybe you're doing paid inspections. I would suggest doing that and then rolling over the cost for the inspection into whatever service you provide. That way you protect yourself from a financial standpoint. But even if you're doing free inspections, you still want to get consensus on the details of the work that you're providing for the customer before you actually book the call. And it might sound like a lengthy process to some people, but the whole process is designed to build trust and connection with your client. That way, when you get to the point where you're trying to ask them for a commitment, hey, let's go ahead and schedule an appointment to have my technician come out there and take a look. They're not just saying yes because they have a problem. They're saying yes because they want you to fix the problem. And there's a difference.
Mhm. Yeah, first off, that is an excellent sales process flow, especially separating the service objections from the price
Mhm.
objections is something that I don't think enough people are doing, especially on the wildlife side. I see it a little bit on the pest. Like you said, there's a little extra layer of patience built in there where people can take some time and deliberate and think through the decision making that they've got. Whereas a wildlife issue is, okay, I need this out of my house today.
Yeah.
The thing that I see happening the most frequently is wildlife guys know the wildlife really well, but don't know the sales game well. So they jump on a call and assume because I know everything about wildlife, I'm going to be able to sell this job. And they get
Mhm.
on and they say, okay, you don't want raccoons in your house for X, Y, and Z reason. There's different parasites they carry, all these different things. But what they're not doing is they're not pushing someone into a place where they can make a smart decision about the inspection itself.
Yep.
And you almost have to sell the inspection first before you even sell a
Oh,
remediation
100%.
project. So I think your process takes people through that in a way that even, on both sides, on pest and wildlife, someone could follow that flow and get to a place with customers as they come in that they can sell jobs a little bit more easily. Another thing that I just want to highlight that you touched on is availability being key. You've got to answer the phone.
Oh, yeah.
And I only say this to highlight one particular thing that I preach about a lot, but every time it comes up, I always underscore it. There is a feedback loop between your answering the phone and your digital marketing process that isn't just did the lead convert. What
Mhm.
happens is platforms like Facebook and Google register phone calls after a certain amount of time.
Mhm.
If they don't register phone calls, they try that the platforms self automate and try to go other directions to find phone calls. And if you are not answering your phone when those calls are coming in, even if they are qualified calls, even if they do lead to sales, the marketing systems themselves will self automate to try to find different types of callers. And if the good callers are getting automated against, you're losing out on valuable data driven marketing. So,
Yep.
again, always just want to highlight that when that comes up. Coming back to getting those calls through the phone line, getting those calls into the inbox or the leads into the inbox, what platforms, if any, stand out to you as driving good quality leads on the pest side?
Yeah. So on the pest side of things, the usual go-tos, Google is a huge player in the pest control side of the realm. So you've got local service ads or LSA.
Mm-hmm.
People might know it as Google Guaranteed on the customer facing side, right?
Yeah.
PPC, just typical paid ads, is going to be the next one. And then from there on, you've got a couple of different other options. You can jump into Facebook, right? You can jump into Instagram, or we'll just call Meta in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Nextdoor, and then the paid platforms. I think the best volume, quality, and cost combination, and again, it's different for the market and depending on how you play the game, but the bigger that you get, the more for pest control that leans into Google.
Mm-hmm.
But that also relies on you having a really sharp GMB. People think about SEO from just a website standpoint, but there's a whole kind of part of it that people kind of dub local SEO, which is really optimizing your GMB profile, because that kind of communicates with Google along with your website to inform customers on what their best choice is, right?
Sure.
And the more active you are on both from a website SEO standpoint and a local SEO standpoint, the more Google sees you as an active player in the game. So it's not just about the money that you spend, it's about how much back end work you're putting into it so that Google identifies you as a good match to search queries. So when someone says, hey, wildlife professional near me, I got to think about what customers are actually searching because for pest control, it's pest control company. People just know that. But on the wildlife side, it might be raccoon in my attic or how to get rid of raccoons or whatever that situation is. So the back end work with your SEO, your Google My Business profile, that contributes heavily to your performance with Google.
Yeah.
And then with Facebook, it's similar, right? So you have to have a Facebook profile that is complete, that has all the right information in it, that when customers see it, when they see your ads, they view your brand as a trusted company.
Mm-hmm.
People see a lot of ads on Facebook and Instagram, right? And a lot of times you see some of these ads and you're like, oh, those are atrocious. Like they just seem like either an international company or just a company that doesn't quite know exactly what their consumer or customer is.
Sure.
And so you really have to make sure that those ads are custom tailored to your customer avatar. Who are you trying to target? What kind of decision, what kind of action are you trying to get them to take in that ad? Like you said, wildlife is a very quick journey in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
They see a problem, they want a solution right away. And you want to make sure that your social media ads provide enough brand awareness and recognition that when they have a problem, they remember who you are
Yeah.
because they might not necessarily go straight to Facebook or Instagram when they have a decision. That's usually an intentional platform like Google.
Yeah.
But typically on Facebook, it's more of a brand awareness type of campaign.
Hmm. No, I think that that is incredibly helpful and makes a lot of sense. We see, like you said, the more you're willing to, the more appetite you have for the market. Google definitely seems to be the way to go. And we see a lot, Facebook, especially on pest with Facebook, speed to
Mhm.
lead is huge. If
Oh,
you're doing instant forms on Facebook and someone submits, if you are not getting in touch with them in literal seconds, it's
yes.
lost. And it's a lot like, maybe you'll agree with this, and maybe you've got some insights here, but I almost feel like social media advertising is more akin to door because you have to,
Mhm.
you are intruding on someone's day to put your brand in front of somebody.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. And social media, because people are on those platforms usually for leisure, right? They're on there to scroll and to just relax.
yeah,
And so when your ad pops up, one, it has to be engaging enough to keep their attention because they're used to seeing funny things. They're used to
mhm,
seeing stuff from their friends and family. All of a sudden, an ad pops up. And if it's not engaging enough to keep their attention, they just keep scrolling,
sure,
right? And especially if you have form fills, like you were saying, form fills and some of these other sharing, like lead sharing platforms like Thumbtack and Angie,
mhm,
the response time is just so critical. On the Angie and Thumbtack side, and whatever other platform is similar, the reason why that response time is so critical is because those leads are going out to other companies,
yeah,
right? On the social media side, the reason why the response time is so critical is because people have such a short attention span through those platforms. Like I was saying, they're scrolling, right? They're going through stuff. And so maybe they see your ad and they go, oh, yeah, I'd want more information on that. They fill out a quick form, they hit submit. And then by the time that form fill comes in, like if you don't call them right away or get in touch with them right away, not only will they forget they even submitted the form, 5 minutes goes by, you call and they don't connect the dice. They're just, oh, some unknown number's calling me. I'm not going to answer that.
yeah,
Maybe you leave a message. I hope you do. Maybe you send a text. Maybe you send an email if your form fill captures that information. Now you're trying to play catch up on a lead that if you would have called within 10 seconds or 30 seconds, they do connect the dots. Leads through form fills, and we've had to separate those out through traditional evaluation methods because inbound calls have a completely different profile when it comes to closing and conversion than form fills do.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, a question that I have, at what point and what benefit do you see to bringing marketing in house versus exclusively working with external providers?
For me, it's usually a numbers game,
Mm,
right? You look at your marketing, you look at your spend, you look at the ROI that you're getting, and eventually everyone's going to ask the question, okay, could I get better performance from an in-house person versus a third party?
mm,
And it really depends on the in-house person and it really depends on the third party
sure.
because they, if you think about it, they can execute on some things and they have a lot of overlap there, but it's not always the case. For example, you might have an in-house person who executes on a lot more local brand awareness campaigns,
Mm,
a lot more like company culture and customer win back campaigns, and a lot of those other internal automations because they're in the business with your employees and they see the customer flow and the customer journey. And not to say that you can have a third party that also engages in that way,
sure.
but typically a third party marketing agency is going to be more focused in specializing in paid advertising.
Mm,
If you have a third-party marketing company, they're getting data, especially if they have multiple clients, they're getting data from a lot of different markets, from a lot of different campaigns, from all these different modes and methods of execution. And then they're taking all the best pro tips that they can glean from all of that information and they're bringing it into your company, right?
yeah.
So that's an advantage that a third party company might have over an in-house person. Again, not that both of them can't execute on the same things,
Mhm.
but you just might notice that either party is a little bit more adept to doing those separate ones. I think more that I think about it now that I've had a third party marketing agency for multiple years,
Mhm.
part of me thinks that eventually what I'll end up doing is both. I'll have a director of marketing that handles a lot of the stuff I talked about internally, and then they will manage the partnership, the relationship with a third party marketing company who executes on all of our paid advertising and brings all of that data and information into our company. And it's an extra investment,
Mhm.
but I think that eventually you get to the size of company where that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Eric. This has been incredible. You have shared more information than I could have possibly imagined. And that's impressive considering I already knew how much information you had stored away from the BugBux podcast.
Thanks, man.
Um, is there anything that we did not talk about that you think could bring operators value right now?
I think that especially, and depending on what time of year you're listening to this, but I think this is really applicable any time of year.
Mm.
If you have growth in mind, right? It's not difficult for owners and PCOs or even wildlife operators to sit down and think, I would love to grow, right? The vision part of it, there's no shortage of that. People
Sure.
want to grow, they want to build, they want to have an impact. That's true. A lot of times where they fall short is the next steps, where it's okay, if I want to get this growth, what's my strategy?
Yeah.
What do I need to put in place? What do I need to build? What do I need to systemize? What processes do I have to have in order to actually execute on that? And sometimes the strategy is something that a lot of visionaries, a lot of business owners just don't really get. As much as they try to put energy and effort into it, it's difficult. The first thing that I would recommend is if you find yourself in that place, bring on somebody, go out and ask. Contact a guy like Tate and say, hey, dude, this is what I want to achieve. I just don't know how to get there. Can you help me figure out a plan for this so that you can have the strategy? And if you're thinking about building partnerships and networks, then try to find somebody who is a strategist, right?
Mhm.
Find somebody who knows how to navigate that part of the plan. The next goal after that is something that visionaries usually do well is just the execution. Once you have a strategy, go out and do,
Yeah.
right? Just put in the effort, take action, and just go. You will learn more through action than you will learn through guessing. So don't paralyze yourself via analysis in the strategy phase, right? Pick a plan and go after it and then get the data, get the results back from it. So make sure you've got someone to execute. And then, of course, what we've been talking about a lot during this call is evaluate,
Mhm.
right? Once you have the data from all the action that you took and you have to find a way to capture that data, you have to ask yourself the big question. Okay, is what I did actually moving the needle? And is it pushing me toward the vision that I have for my company? Is
Mhm.
that a yes? Is that a no? It's probably somewhere in the middle. And then you have to be honest with yourself about what your next steps are. And for me, it's this ongoing process. I've got a vision. I pick a plan. I execute on it. I evaluate. I see how that connects to the vision. And then I continue on and it's ever evolving and ever changing. Whatever part of that process you feel like you struggle with, don't don't keep hitting your head against the wall trying to learn how to do it. We have such an awesome way of networking now, such awesome opportunities of finding good qualified people. Reach out, partner with somebody who knows a little bit more about that side of the business, and you can execute on what you're good at, and they can do the same.
I couldn't agree more. And much like you and I got in touch, there's networking opportunities. Talk to the other pest control operators, talk to professionals in the industry who do the thing you are looking to do. If there's something that you want to do or want to accomplish, find someone who has done it already and just reach out and ask if you can talk to them for a minute, because the worst
Yeah,
they can say is no. And the best thing that happens is they say yes and you solve your problem.
100%. Yep.
Eric, you've provided so much value. I know we shouted out the podcast and Natura already. Where can listeners find you if they want to learn more from you?
Yeah, so the podcast is a big one. We're on all the major platforms. And if you're a pest control owner, we have a free resource and a community. It's just BugBux Plus on Facebook. And for owners, it's BugBux Plus owners only. And for everybody who's a non-owner team member, it's just BugBux Plus for Pest Pros. And both of those groups provide tips, tricks, tools, but just mostly collaboration and networking with like-minded individuals, just like you said, where you can ask people for advice and get the answers you're looking for from people who have been there or are going through something similar.
Mhm.
And then other than that, I'm on Facebook a lot. You can hit me up on Messenger if you like. I'm on Instagram. Welcome to reach out to me anytime. I love questions, especially if it's something that can provide more value to my network.
Eric, thank you so much again. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Bassett, host of the BugBux Podcast, learning platform BugBux Plus, and VP and co-owner of Natura Pest Control in Vancouver, Washington.
Tate, it's been a pleasure, man.
Likewise.